Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another short Quran moment. I've recorded this as a video because it's a bit more complicated, this slide. So again, we're continuing with our journey with ayah number 26, and we're talking about the word yastahi, which occurs in the ayah. And the question I have today is, how did early and later scholars understand words such as shy when they're used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So I just wanted to help you understand what the difference was in how they were understood. So the first question is text authenticity. So do both the early and later scholars agree that the text, i.e., is authentic? In other words, when we were talking like this hadith we had, Inna Allah ta'ala hayyun kareemun yastahi idha rafa'a ar-rajulu ilayhi yadayhi an yaruddahuma sifran kha'ibatain. That indeed Allah the Exalted is shy and generous. He shies away from turning a person who raises his hands in dua to him empty and fruitless. So both the ulama who used to be there in the early generations of Islam and the ones who came later agree that this is authentic and that this word is authentically reported. But they have a different position. So the early scholars, also known as the Salaf, they said that the word hayyun, or the verb yastahi, which means shy, equals shy. But any negative connotations, any negative ideas did not apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything that showed a likeness did not apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I.e., if there's any similarity between what came to your mind when a human being is shy, that does not apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because laysa kamithlihi shay, there's nothing that is equal to him. And any negative meaning inside the word shy does not apply to Allah. So this is the position of the Salaf, or the early scholars. Later scholars, they took a slightly different point of view, and they said that shy here means prevent. So for example, if we read the hadith again, it would read, indeed Allah the Exalted is shy and generous, and he does not prevent a person, or does not leave a person who raises his hands in dua to him, and he doesn't leave him and turn his hands empty and fruitless. So they would interpret it slightly differently. And why did they do that? They did that because they said that shyness is a weakness, because the meaning of the word shy is a constraint of the self because of fear of being told off. So when somebody is shy, they said, if somebody is shy, they feel in their heart, they're afraid that other people are going to say something, and that's why they don't do that thing, and that's why they're shy. And they said this meaning of fear, of course, does not befit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is not afraid of anything. So this is the reason why they said that we have to reinterpret this word as taraka, to leave. I wrote prevent here, but actually should say leave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not leave a man completely who raises his hands for dua. So let's analyze this a bit further. What's going on here? To understand this, the difference between these two approaches, we need to ask ourselves a question: and what meaning do words have? So let's take the word tree. Okay? Now if you ask somebody what's a tree, in your brain, if I asked you this picture here, is that a tree? The answer is yes, obviously it looks like a tree, it's a tree. But if I asked you for a definition of the word tree, now here's an English definition, let's read what it says. A woody perennial plant, typically having a single stem or trunk growing to a considerable height and bearing lateral branches at some distance from the ground. So this is a very wordy definition of the word tree. Now if we look at this second picture here, this is this a tree? So if you ask a person just naturally, do you think that's a tree? You say yes, it's a tree without branches. But if we go by its definition, so I've highlighted a bit, it said the definition says bearing lateral branches. In other words, it has branches that go sideways, laterally. This thing is now not a tree by definition. So here we have the reason why this early approach and the later approach are different. So I've tried to summarize this in this table. So the early scholars they understood words by their innate meaning. What a human being, when they hear the word, understands. Just like a child. If you were to ask a child, what's a tree? They know it's a tree, but if you tell them define what a tree is, they find it very difficult. Later scholars relied on definitions, on very precise definitions. They tried to be precise and capture the meaning of a word. Now, so the early scholars looked at definitions by use, and the later scholars looked at it by meaning. So, according to these two scholarly opinions, is it right to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is shy or not? So the early scholars said yes, except for negatives and similarities. So they said that Allah, we can use this word because Allah or His Messenger have used this word, but there are no negatives, and we say that there is nothing similar to Allah. Very simple position. The later scholars said that the meaning, because the meaning as it's defined is not applicable, then it must mean something else, such as leave or abandon. So, what's the outcome? In both positions, they both understand the hadith to mean the same thing. So when we say, indeed Allah the Exalted is shy and generous, and He shies away from turning a person away, both scholars understand that when you make a dua, the way to make it more accepted is by raising your hands. So the outcome is the same. So to conclude, this is a slightly complicated topic of Aqidah, but I just wanted to illustrate the difference between the Salaf and the later scholars. So the analysis of the early scholars, was simple, and the analysis of the later scholars is more complex. The analysis of the early scholars relies on the way the word is used in the language. And of course, the way the word is used in the language by its native speakers is right all the time. The later scholars relied more on definitions of what a word means. And of course, not every definition is perfect, as we saw here. This definition of a tree is not perfect because it misses out a tree without branches. The later scholars agree that if you adopt the way of the early scholars, then that's fine. But the way that the early scholars understood these words does not match the way the later scholars understood this. But if we look at it from a point of outcome, how do we understand this? The outcome, the end result, is exactly the same. So this is just to show that there was a reason why later scholars took this different opinion, and of course they were trying to maintain the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the difference is that their approach is more complex, their definitions may not be perfect, and of course if you follow the early opinion, you are safe. If you follow the later opinion, then that's something new and potentially may not be right. So this is why the people who follow the early scholars insist it's much better and easier and more correct to follow the understanding of the early generations of Muslims. I pray that you understand this point, and that this shed more light on this difficult issue sometimes, and it makes us more understanding of the other opinion. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.